November 7, 2025, the U.S. Army's M240 machine gun, 26 pounds, 650 to 950 rounds per minute, a standard infantry weapon in every NATO country. Take a look at the design: belt feed system, roller-locked mechanism, quick change barrel in 7 seconds. None of this is American. It was all invented in Germany in 1942. The MG42 won 200 rounds per minute, a design so perfect that 83 years later, every modern army in the world uses a copy or direct evolution of it. The German Federal Armed Forces MG3, identical to the MG42, just in NATO caliber. The Russian PKM, belt feed system directly copied from the MG42. Even modern Chinese and Israeli machine guns use German principles from 83 years ago. Today, I'm going to show you the documented technical lineage from the German Armed Forces to NATO. The true story of how a German machine gun from 1942 became the basis of every modern infantry tactic. Technically speaking, the MG42 wasn't just a machine gun, it was a revolutionizing of the entire concept of automatic firearms. 200 rounds per minute, that's 20 rounds per second. The characteristic sound that Allied soldiers described as Hitler's buzzsaw wasn't some psychological effect, it was pure technical superiority. Compare that to what the Allies had in 1942. The American Browning M1919, 400 to 600 rounds per minute. The British Bren gun, 500 rounds per minute. The Soviet DP-28, 550 rounds per minute. The MG42 fired twice as fast as any Allied weapon, but speed alone doesn't explain why this design is still the basis today. The real innovation lay in the overall system. The MG42 weighed 25.6 pounds, lighter than most Allied machine guns. The barrel could be changed in 5 to 7 seconds, without tools. Allied machine guns took minutes and special equipment. The roller-locked bolt system was so ingenious that weapon designers still marvel at it today. It used the recoil of the weapon itself to load the next round. No complex gas mechanics, no vulnerable pistons, pure physical efficiency. The belt feed system allowed continuous fire as long as ammunition was available. 50-round belts could be connected in seconds. American and British machine guns used magazines or rigid belts. German infantry could fire for minutes without reloading. 1942, Mauser factories in Oberndorf am Neckar. Production of the MG42 began. The Allies had no idea what was coming. The first reports came from North Africa. German positions with 2 or 3 MG42s held up entire companies. British officers initially thought the Germans had 10 or 15 machine guns per position. The rate of fire was so high that it seemed impossible to come from a single weapon. But it was one weapon. One gunner, 200 rounds per minute. That's the firepower of 3 Browning M1919s, manned by 9 men, concentrated in a single 25.6-pound package. The psychological effect was devastating. The MG42 produced a unique sound, not the slow tack-tack-tack of Allied machine guns, a continuous, ripping brrrt, like a chainsaw through wood. Allied soldiers called it Hitler's buzzsaw. The sound alone triggered panic. Veterans described how the MG42 fire drowned out everything else on the battlefield, how it was impossible to move against it. A position with an MG42 had the same suppressive power as 3 or 4 Allied positions, but it wasn't just psychology. The ballistics were real. 200 rounds per minute means that every square yard of a 50-meter area could be saturated with bullets in seconds. Allied tactics were based on advancing between machine gun bursts. That worked against Brownings or Brens. There were pauses between the bursts. With the MG42, there were no pauses. The gunner could fire continuously, only stopping to change the barrel. A 5-second break. then another 200 or 300 rounds. A well-trained MG42 team could hold a position for hours. It took years for the Allies to understand how the MG42 worked. The first captured examples arrived in Great Britain and the USA in 1942. British and American engineers disassembled them into individual parts. What they found shocked them. The weapon had only 49 main components. In comparison, the Browning M1919 had over 90. Fewer parts meant faster production, lower costs, higher reliability. The MG42 used stamping and welding instead of precision milling. German factories could mass-produce MG42s, over 400,000 units by 1945. The Allies produced more machine guns. But every single MG42 was superior to 3 Allied weapons. The roller-locked system was the heart of it, 2 small rollers in the bolt. When the shot was fired, the recoil pushed the bolt backwards. The rollers rolled into recesses, delaying the opening for milliseconds, enough time for the pressure in the barrel to drop safely. Then the bolt opened, ejected the empty casing, and a spring pushed it back. On the way back, it took the next cartridge from the belt, pushed it into the chamber, and the rollers locked again. The entire cycle took 0.05 seconds, 20 times per second, without gas pistons, without complex levers, pure mechanical elegance. American engineers tried to copy the system. The first prototypes exploded. The timing was critical. If the rollers opened too early, the overpressure tore the bolt apart. If they opened too late, the pressure built up and the weapon jammed. German metallurgy and precision made the difference. The rollers had to be exactly dimensioned. The recesses had to be perfectly ground. American factories in 1943 couldn't reproduce that. They had the blueprints, they had the measurements, but they couldn't maintain the tolerances. The belt feed system was another innovation. Metal belts with 50 cartridges. Each cartridge sat in a link that opened when it was pulled into the weapon. The empty links fell out. A new belt could simply be attached to the old one. German design allowed unlimited belt lengths. In practice, gunners used 250-round boxes. American and British machine guns used rigid cloth belts or magazines. Reloading meant interruption. With the MG42, reloading meant inserting a new belt, 2 to 3 seconds. Then another 250 rounds. The quick-change barrel was revolutionary. At 200 rounds per minute, every barrel heats up extremely quickly. After 200 to 250 rounds, the MG42 barrel had to be changed. German engineers made this trivial. A lever on the right side, push, pull the barrel out forward, insert a new barrel, lever back, done. 5 to 7 seconds. A well-trained gunner could do it in the dark. American machine guns. The barrel was permanently screwed in. Changing it took minutes and required tools. Overheating meant letting the weapon cool down. With the MG42, overheating meant swapping the barrel and continuing to fire. The tactical flexibility was unprecedented. The MG42 could be used as a light machine gun with a bipod, weighing in at 25.6 pounds or 11.6 kilograms. A man could carry it and fire from the hip. With a tripod, it became a heavy machine gun, effective range over 3,280 feet or 1,000 meters. With an optical sight, over 6,560 feet or 2,000 meters. The same weapon, no modifications. Allied armies had separate light and heavy machine guns. The German armed forces had the MG42, one design, all roles. 1943, Eastern Front. Soviet reports describe German positions holding up battalions. Often it was just a handful of soldiers with an MG42. The Soviet tactic was mass, human waves overrunning German lines through pure numbers. But against MG42 positions, that simply didn't work anymore. 200 rounds per minute, quick change barrel every few minutes. An MG42 could mow down hundreds of attackers in minutes. Soviet commanders demanded an answer. Joseph Stalin personally demanded an equivalent machine gun. Soviet weapons factories were given captured MG42s. They were ordered to copy it. The Soviets failed. Their attempt to replicate the MG42 was the SG-43 Goryunov. It reached 600 rounds per minute. Half as fast as the MG42, it weighed 30 pounds or 13.6 kilograms. Heavier than the MG42. The barrel change took over a minute. It worked, but it was not a copy. The Soviets couldn't reproduce the roller-locked system. They used a gas-operated system, easier to produce, but slower and heavier. The SG-43 became standard in the Red Army, but every Soviet soldier who had fought against the MG42 knew it was inferior. The Americans had a similar problem. They wanted to copy the MG42, but their production methods were incompatible. American factories were geared towards precision milling. The MG42 used stamping and welding, two completely different manufacturing philosophies. An American MG42 copy would have required new factories, new tools, new training, impossible in the middle of the war. So the Americans kept the Browning M1919, reliable, proven, but slow, 400 to 600 rounds per minute. American tactics compensated with firepower, more machine guns, more artillery, more airplanes. But at the weapon system level, the MG42 was superior. 1944, Normandy. American and British troops learned about the MG42 firsthand. German bunkers on Omaha Beach. Each bunker had one or two MG42s. They had a clear field of fire over the beach. 200 rounds per minute, belt-fed with hundreds of rounds. The first wave of the assault was decimated. Surviving soldiers described how MG42 fire made the water boil, how bullets turned the beaches into clouds of sand, how it was impossible to move forward. The Allies only took the bunkers through overwhelming numbers. Dozens of soldiers died for each bunker. The MG42 alone held up thousands. After the landing, Allied troops captured hundreds of MG42s. Many units began using them, officially forbidden because ammunition logistics were a nightmare. The MG42 used 7.92 650mm Mauser. Allied supply was 3006 Springfield and 303 British. But the weapon was so superior that soldiers hoarded German ammunition. An MG42 with 500 rounds of German ammunition was more valuable than two Brownings with unlimited supply. That's how superior the design was. The British Army conducted detailed tests. They compared the MG42 directly to the Bren gun and the Vickers. The results were damning. The MG42 fired twice as fast. It was lighter. It was more reliable. The barrel change was 10 times faster. The British wrote in their report, "The MG42 is the best machine gun of the war. We have no equivalent weapon. Every attempt to copy it has failed." The report was classified. The British public was not allowed to know how technically superior German weapons were. American ordnance officers came to the same conclusion. A 1944 report said, "The MG42 represents the pinnacle of machine gun design. Its rate of fire, reliability, and ease of production are unmatched. Our machine guns are 10 years obsolete in comparison." The report recommended immediate reverse engineering. But again, production was the problem. America couldn't switch to a new machine gun in 1944. The Browning remained standard until the end of the war. What the Allies couldn't achieve during the war became a priority afterward. 1945. Germany surrendered. Operation Paperclip began. 1,600 German scientists and engineers were brought to the USA. But it wasn't just rocket scientists. Weapon designers came too. engineers from Mauser factories, specialists who had developed the MG42. They were brought to Aberdeen Proving Ground, the US Army Weapons Testing Center. Their task: help us understand the MG42, show us how to produce it. The German engineers were cooperative. They had no choice. But they were also proud. The MG42 was their masterpiece. They gave detailed briefings. They explained the roller-locked system. They demonstrated the production methods. They handed over original blueprints from Mauser factories. Everything was documented. Hundreds of pages of technical reports, all classified. The USA didn't want the Soviets to know how much German technology they had adopted. But even with German help, it took years. The USA didn't produce a direct MG42 copy. Instead, they developed the M60, only introduced in 1957. 12 years after the end of the war, the M60 used many MG42 principles: belt feed system based on the MG42, quick change barrel inspired by the MG42, but it used a gas-operated system, not roller-locked. American engineers still couldn't reliably produce the roller system. The M60 reached 550 rounds per minute, better than the Browning, but still half as fast as the MG42. The German Federal Armed Forces had no such problems. 1950s, West Germany was allowed to rearm. The German Federal Armed Forces needed a machine gun. They had the original MG42 blueprints. They had the factories. They had the engineers. The solution was simple: reproduce the MG42. Small change: NATO caliber 7.62 x 51 mm instead of 7.92 x 57 mm Mauser. The result was the MG3. It is the MG42. Identical design, identical rate of fire, while 200 rounds per minute. Identical barrel change, identical reliability. Only the cartridge was different. The MG3 was introduced in 1959, and it's still in service today. 2025, a full 66 years later, the German Federal Armed Forces still uses it. Several nations in Europe and Asia still use it. That's how perfect the design was. A weapon from 1942 with minimal changes is still serviceable 83 years later. No other machine gun has that longevity. That's a testament to German engineering prowess. But the MG42 design influenced more than just the MG3. Every modern machine gun carries its legacy. Take the Belgian FN MAG, developed in the 1950s. They studied Hitler's buzzsaw intensely. Belt feed system, based on the MG42. Quick change barrel, inspired by the MG42. The FN MAG achieves 650 to 1,000 rounds per minute. Not as fast as the MG42, but close. It became the basis for dozens of modern variants. The US Army adopted the FN MAG as the M240 in the 1970s. So, the standard US machine gun today is a Belgian adaptation of a German design from 1942. The irony is almost too perfect. The US couldn't copy the MG42 during World War II. They couldn't produce a direct copy from 1945 to 1960. So, in 1977, they bought a foreign weapon based on MG42 principles. The M240 is now in every US infantry squad, in every Humvee, on every tank. The most widely used machine gun in the US Army is a German design from 83 years ago. The M240 weighs 26 pounds, almost identical to the MG42. It uses the same belt feed principle. Metal belts with disintegrating links. The barrel change takes about 10 seconds, slightly slower than the MG42, but the same concept. The rate of fire is 650 to 950 rounds per minute. Slower than the MG42 because American military doctrine prioritizes longer barrel life. But the design, directly inspired by the MG42, any weapons expert sees the similarity immediately. The belt feed system, the way the bolt works, the quick change barrel mechanics, all echoes of the MG42. The M240 has been used in every American conflict since 1977, the First Gulf War, Somalia, Bosnia, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria. Over 40 years in service, it's the most reliable machine gun in the US Army. Soldiers call it the pig because it's heavy, but they love it. It always works. In desert heat, in Afghan mountains, in Iraqi dust, the M240 never fails. And that's German engineering from 1942, 83 years of evolution. But the DNA is still Hitler's buzzsaw, but America isn't alone. The Soviet Union developed the PKM in the 1960s. It's not directly an MG42 copy. The Soviets used a gas-operated system, not a roller-locked one. But look at the belt feed system. Metal belts with disintegrating links, exactly like the MG42. Look at the tactical role. General-purpose machine gun, light enough for one man, strong enough for sustained fire, exactly like the MG42. The PKM weighs 16.5 pounds. Even lighter than the MG42. Rate of fire 650 rounds per minute. Slower than the MG42, but faster than most Western weapons. The PKM is the standard machine gun in over 50 countries: Russia, China, North Korea, Vietnam, every former Soviet republic, every country that bought Soviet weapons. Millions of PKMs have been produced. It's the most widespread machine gun in the world, after the MG42 and its direct descendants. And it's based on principles the MG42 established: general-purpose design, belt feed system, quick-change barrel, high rate of fire, all concepts perfected in Germany in 1942. China developed the Type 67, a direct copy of the Soviet PKM. But the Chinese also studied captured MG42s from World War II. The Type 67 uses the same belt feed system, the same tactical doctrine, the same role. It's a general-purpose machine gun, just like the MG42 defined it. Over 1 million Type 67s have been produced. They were exported to Pakistan, Afghanistan, Africa. Everywhere you see a Chinese machine gun, you see MG42 principles in action. Israel developed the Negev, a modern, lightweight machine gun, 16.5 pounds. But look at the design: belt-fed, quick-change barrel, dual feed system that accepts both belts and magazines. The tactical philosophy: general purpose, a weapon for all roles, like the MG42. Israeli weapons designers studied every successful machine gun in history. The MG42 was at the top of the list. The Negev is not a copy, but the influences are clear: German efficiency, adapted for modern Israeli needs. Look at modern NATO doctrine. Every infantry squad has a squad automatic weapon or a general-purpose machine gun. The role of this weapon is sustained suppressive fire, high rate of fire, reliability, quick-change barrel for continuous fire. That's exactly the role the MG42 defined in 1942. Before the MG42, armies had heavy machine guns on tripods and light machine guns for mobility. Two separate weapons, two separate doctrines. The MG42 combined both in one package. NATO copied the concept directly. Soviet doctrine after World War II, based on MG42 principles. Every motorized rifle squad has a PKM. The role: sustained fire, suppression, cover for maneuvering infantry. Exactly what the MG42 did. The Soviets fought against the MG42 from 1941 to 1945. They experienced its effectiveness firsthand. Millions of Soviet soldiers died under MG42 fire. After the war, they adopted the concept. The PKM is Moscow's answer to Hitler's buzzsaw, 20 years late. But they learned the lesson. Modern conflicts prove the longevity of the design. Afghanistan 2001 to 2021. Taliban fighters use PKMs. American soldiers use M240s. German Federal Armed Forces troops use MG3s. 3 different weapons, all based on MG42 principles, all functioning perfectly after 20 years of desert warfare. That's no accident. The MG42 design was so robust that its descendants survived decades of extreme use. Dust, heat, humidity, cold, they always work. That's German engineering. Iraq 2003 to 2011. American Marines with M240s, Iraqi Army with Soviet PKMs, British troops with L7A2, another FN MAG variant based on MG42 principles, even on opposite sides. Armies used descendants of the same German weapon from 1942. The MG42 defined what a modern machine gun should be. 83 years later, no one has deviated from that standard. Every successful design follows the same blueprint. Look at weapons development today. FN is developing the FN Evolis, an ultra-modern machine gun with a polymer housing and advanced ergonomics. But the core principles, belt-fed, quick-change barrel, general-purpose roll, a rate of fire for suppressive fire. The MG42 lives on. All concepts trace back to the MG42. Heckler & Koch develops the MG5, a successor to the MG3 for the German Federal Armed Forces. Modern materials, modular construction. But again, belt-fed, quick-change barrel, high rate of fire. The MG42 legacy is unmistakable. American Special Forces still sometimes use the M60, the old weapon from the 1960s. Why? Because it uses MG42 principles and is incredibly reliable. SEAL teams took the M60 to Afghanistan. Delta Force used the M60 in Somalia. This weapon is 50 years old, based on a German design from 83 years ago. And elite soldiers still trust it with their lives. That speaks volumes about the quality of the original concept. The economic figures are staggering. The MG3 is still being produced today, 2025, 66 years after its introduction. 83 years after the original MG42, Germany exports the MG3 worldwide. Pakistan produces it under license. Turkey produces it. Iran produced it. Dozens of countries still use it as a frontline weapon. The M240, over 200,000 units produced for the US Army alone. Dozens of other countries buy it. The PKM, millions produced, more than any other modern machine gun. All these weapons, all these billions of dollars in military spending are based on a design from 1942. Technological analysis reveals why the MG42 concept is timeless. It uses physical principles that do not change. Reusing recoil energy for the next shot, belt feed for continuous fire without magazines, quick change barrel for thermal management. These concepts are so fundamental that no amount of modern technology makes them obsolete. You can use modern materials. You can add electronic fire control. You can mount optics and lasers, but the core mechanics, still the same. Still MG42, metallurgy is better today. Polymers are lighter. CNC machines produce more precise parts. But the MG42 design was so good that even with 1940s technology, it outperformed modern weapons. Imagine what German engineers could do with today's technology. Actually, you don't have to imagine. The MG3 is exactly that. MG42 design with 1960s materials. It works perfectly. The FN MAG is MG42 principles with 1950s technology. It's the most exported machine gun in the Western world. The design was so forward-thinking that 80 years of technological advancement have only brought incremental improvements, not a revolution. The psychological impact of the MG42 still exists today. Veterans who fought against the MG42 describe it with "ow." The sound alone is unforgettable. Interviews with American veterans from World War II. They remember the MG42 more than any other German weapon. Not the Tiger tanks. Not the Stukas. The MG42, Because it was personal, because they heard it, saw it, felt it, because it was deadly and omnipresent. Modern soldiers who experience the MG3 in training say the same thing. The sound is unique. The rate of fire is impressive. It commands respect. This is more than just weapons history. It's the story of how a single design defined an entire category of weapons. Before the MG42, there was no true general-purpose machine gun concept. After the MG42, there is nothing else. It set the standard that every army worldwide adopted. No other weapon of World War II had this impact. Not the M1 Garand, not the T-34, not the B-17. The MG42 alone created a new category and remained its ultimate example. This technical truth is not just history. It's in every smartphone photo of a soldier with an M240, in every news video of conflicts where the PKM is used, in every German Federal Armed Forces training exercise with the MG3. The MG42 design is present in every modern conflict, 83 years after its introduction. When you watch the next military documentary, pay attention to the machine guns, belt-fed, quick-change barrel, the high rate of fire. That's MG42. That's German design from 1942, still the basis of every infantry tactic worldwide. If you appreciate this technical documentation, if you believe that true engineering history should be preserved, support this channel with super thanks. This research, these technical details, these historical connections, they require hundreds of hours of work, reading original military reports, analyzing engineering documents, studying veteran interviews, comparing modern specifications. This is not superficial history. This is deep technical analysis. Your support allows me to tell these stories. The stories that mainstream history ignores. The technical truth behind modern military. Back to the analysis. Why couldn't any other country replicate the MG42 during the war? The answer lies in industrial philosophy. German weapons production in the 1930s and early 1940s emphasized efficiency and cost reduction. The Treaty of Versailles limited German rearmament after World War I. When Hitler ignored these restrictions, Germany had to rearm quickly. That meant creating designs that were fast and cheap to produce. The MG42 is the perfect example. 49 parts, stamping and welding instead of milling, a weapon that could be made in hours instead of days. American and British weapons production came from a different tradition. They emphasized durability and precision. The Browning M1919 was designed to last for decades. Every part was precisely milled. The result was an extremely reliable weapon, but slow and expensive to produce. When the war came, the Allies could scale up their factories. They produced more Brownings, but they couldn't change the production method. The MG42 represented a fundamentally different production philosophy, one that Allied factories couldn't adapt without a complete rebuild. Soviet production had a similar problem. Soviet factories were designed for mass over quality. The DP-28 machine gun was simple, robust, and could be produced in vast quantities. But it was technically simple. No quick-change barrel, no high rate of fire, magazines instead of belt feed. When the Soviets saw the MG42, they recognized its superiority. But replicating it in Soviet factories would have required new tools, new training, new quality control. Impossible in the middle of the war against Germany. So the Soviets did what they did best. They produced more DP-28s and later more SG-43s. Quantity over quality, not because they were stupid, but because their industrial infrastructure left them no choice. That's the real lesson of the MG42. Technical superiority alone doesn't win wars. Germany had the best machine gun, the best tanks, the best infantry tactics, but they lost, because the Allies had industrial capacity. They produced more weapons, more tanks, more aircraft, more ammunition, more everything. The MG42 was a weapon born of 1942. The Allies won in 1945, 3 years in which German technical superiority was overwhelmed by Allied mass production. But after the war, when production no longer mattered, everyone adopted the German design. That's the irony. Germany lost the war, but won the technical future. Operation Paperclip is proof of that. 1,600 German scientists and engineers. The USA wanted anyone with valuable knowledge. Rocket scientists, yes, but also chemists, medical experts, electronic specialists, and weapon designers. Everyone who had contributed to the German technical advantage was deemed valuable. The MG42 was just one of dozens of technologies the USA wanted to adopt, but it was one of the most successful because the design was so fundamentally sound, because it used principles that are timeless, because German engineers understood what a machine gun needed to do and created a perfect tool for it. Today, in 2025, its legacy is everywhere. The German Federal Armed Forces use the MG3 in training. German soldiers are learning on a weapon that their great-grandfathers used in World War II. The same mechanics, the same sound, the same reliability. This is unprecedented. No other army worldwide uses a weapon with 83 years of history, but the MG3 is so good that the German Federal Armed Forces see no reason to replace it. The new MG5 is being introduced, yes. But the MG3 remains in service for special roles. A weapon from 1942 is still relevant in 2025. That is the ultimate testament. American Marines on Okinawa train with the M240. They learn sustained fire, suppression, covering fire. They learn quick change barrel under stress. They learn belt feed management. They don't know they're learning German tactics from 1942. They think it's modern US Marine Corps doctrine. But every technique, every tactic, every principle was perfected 83 years earlier by the German armed forces. The M240 is just the tool. The doctrine is German. Russian soldiers in Siberia train with the PKM. They learn the same techniques. Sustained fire, suppression, rapid barrel change. They think it's Soviet doctrine, but it's German. The Soviets learned from the MG42 what a machine gun should do. The PKM is their attempt to replicate that. 20 years too late, but they learned. Every Russian soldier carrying a PKM carries the legacy of German design. Look at modern video games, Call of Duty, Battlefield. Every military shooter game has the MG42 as an iconic weapon. Players love it for its rate of fire. They love the sound. They love the history. The MG42 is more than a weapon. It's a cultural symbol. It represents German technical excellence. It represents an era when Germany led the world in weapon design. Players worldwide know the MG42. They don't know the M1919 Browning. They don't know the Bren gun, but they know the MG42. That is its cultural longevity. Film and television constantly feature the MG42. Every World War II film has its characteristic sound. Saving Private Ryan, Band of Brothers, Fury. The viewer hears the brrrrt and immediately knows German machine guns. The sound is so iconic that it's instantly recognizable. No other machine gun has this immediate recognition. That psychological impact that lasts 80 years. Veterans who heard it in 1944 still get goosebumps. Modern viewers associate it with intensity and danger. That's the legacy of a perfectly designed weapon. Weapon collectors paid tens of thousands of dollars for original MG42s. A functioning original MG42 from World War II costs $30,000 to $50,000 on the legal collector's market. Deactivated examples cost $5,000 to $10,000. Why? Because collectors understand the history. They understand that the MG42 isn't just a weapon, it's a piece of engineering history. It's the best machine gun ever designed, created in an era without computers, without CNC machines, without modern materials, pure human engineering. That's valuable. That's worth preserving. Museums worldwide display the MG42, the Imperial War Museum in London, the National World War II Museum in New Orleans, the Deutsches Historisches Museum in Berlin. Every significant military museum has an MG42 in its collection, often with detailed explanations of its technical superiority. Museum curators understand the significance. They know that the MG42 changed history, not politically, not strategically, but technically. It set a standard that has lasted 83 years, that deserves to be in a museum. Academic studies on weapons development constantly cite the MG42. Engineering textbooks on small arms use it as a case study in excellent design. Military historians analyze its influence on modern doctrine. Technical papers on machine gun mechanics reference the roller-locked system. The MG42 isn't just history. It's active research. Universities study it. Engineering students learn from it. Military academies teach it. A weapon from 1942 is still relevant in academic research in 2025. That is unprecedented. The human story behind the design is equally remarkable. Dr. Ing Werner Gruner led the design team at Mauser factories. He was the chief architect of the MG42. After the war, he didn't become part of Operation Paperclip. He stayed in Germany. He worked on civil projects and he died in 1969, relatively unknown. But his design lives on. Millions of weapons are based on his work. He never saw the full impact of his design. He didn't know that in 2025. Over 50 years after his death, his weapon would still be influencing every army worldwide. That's the fate of many great engineers. Their work survives them. Their names are forgotten, but their designs live forever. The technicians and workers at Mauser factories who produced the MG42 are equally forgotten. Thousands worked in the factories. They stamped the parts. They welded the components. They tested the weapons. They were part of the largest mass weapon production in German history. 400,000 MG42s in 3 years. That's over 300 per day. Every single one had to function. Every single one had to be reliable. Quality control was strict. German workers took pride in their work. The result was a weapon that 80 years later is still considered a model of excellence. The soldiers who carried the MG42 are almost all dead. The last World War II veterans are in their late 90s. In 10 years, no one who used an MG42 in combat will still be alive. Their stories die with them, but the weapon remains. The design survives. Future generations will use the M240, the MG5, the next evolution, but the DNA remains MG42. The techniques remain German. The legacy is immortal. That is the true meaning of technical excellence. Politics change, borders change, governments come and go, but a perfect design is eternal. The MG42 was created in Nazi Germany. A government rightly condemned in history, but the weapon itself is morally neutral. It is physics and metallurgy. It is engineering in its purest form. It is a tool, and as a tool, it is perfect. Democracies use it today. NATO uses its principles. The German Federal Armed Forces of Democratic Germany use its direct evolution. The design transcends politics. It is universal. It is timeless. That is the lesson for modern engineers. Study the best designs in history. Understand why they work. The MG42 works because it utilizes fundamental physical principles: recoil as an energy source, metal belts for continuous feed, quick barrel changes for thermal management. These principles do not change. No amount of artificial intelligence or modern materials makes them obsolete. A good design uses physics efficiently. The MG42 is textbook efficiency. Future weapons will learn from it, as weapons of the last 80 years have learned from it. The future of machine gun design remains unclear. Will caseless ammunition be adopted? Will electromagnetic or directed energy weapons replace projectile weapons? Maybe, in 50 years, in 100 years. But until then, the MG42 design will remain the basis, because it represents the optimum for projectile-based machine guns. You can improve it incrementally: lighter materials, better optics, electronic fire control. But the core mechanics, the roller-delayed system, or a modern equivalent, belt feed, quick change barrel, these concepts are optimal. They cannot be significantly improved without changing the entire technology. When projectile-based weapons become obsolete, the MG42 legacy will end. But until then, 10 years, 20 years, maybe 50 years, every new machine gun will learn from the MG42. Designers will analyze the rate of fire. They will study the belt feed system. They will copy the quick change barrel mechanism. They will try to replicate the sound, because the MG42 was perfect, and perfection is timeless. NATO standard for machine guns, 7.62 is 51 mm NATO caliber. Belt-fed, quick change barrel. Rate of fire 600 to 1,000 rounds per minute. All these standards were directly or indirectly influenced by the MG42. NATO did not exist in 1942, but when it was founded in 1949, NATO military planners studied the best weapons of World War II. The MG42 was at the top of every list. NATO standards reflect that every NATO country uses a machine gun that follows MG42 principles: M240, MG3, FN MAG, and its variants. That is not an exaggeration. That is documented fact. Warsaw Pact standards, similar story. The PKM became standard for all Warsaw Pact countries. It follows the same general-purpose principles as the MG42. The Soviets fought against the MG42. They suffered because of it. After the war, they adopted the concepts, East and West. NATO and Warsaw Pact, both learned from Germany, both adopted German machine gun doctrine. The MG42 influenced both sides of the Cold War. That is unprecedented historical impact. Modern non-aligned countries, India produces both the MG3 under license and Soviet PKM variants. Israel developed the Negev based on MG42 studies. Brazil uses FN MAG variants. South Africa developed its own designs, but studied the MG42 intensively. Even countries that were neither NATO nor Warsaw Pact were influenced by the MG42. It is truly universal. Every modern country with an army knows the MG42. Every weapon designer worldwide studies it. That is global impact from a single design team in Oberndorf, Germany, 1942. In your everyday life, you encounter this legacy. Every time you see a soldier with a machine gun on the news, it is likely an MG42 descendant. Every military video game you play, every war movie you watch, every museum you visit, the MG42 is there, invisible to most, but ubiquitous. German design from 83 years ago is deeply embedded in modern culture. Most people don't know it. Now, you do. The MG42, 1,200 rounds per minute, 11.6 kilograms, 49 main components, belt-fed, roller-locked, quick-change barrel. Designed 1942, produced until 1945, redesigned as MG3 in 1959, still in service in 2025, copied by every country worldwide. The basis of every modern machine gun that is not propaganda, that is not nationalism, that is documented technical fact, that is engineering history, that is the legacy of the best machine gun ever built. U.S. Army M240, German principles. German Federal Armed Forces MG3, German original. Russia, PKM. German inspiration. China, Type 67. German concepts. Israel Negev. German studies. Every significant country, every significant army, all use MG42 legacy. 83 years after its introduction, that is the story of how one weapon changed the world, how German design became immortal, how engineering excellence transcends time, politics, and borders. If you believe this story needs to be told, share this video. Let others know the truth, the technical truth that mainstream history ignores. Comment below. What other German technology from World War II still influences us today? Rockets, computers, jet engines. Each of these stories deserves to be told. Your support makes that possible. Until the next video, stay curious, study history, understand technology. The past explains the present, always.